adoption process, and I'll highlight them as we go forward. And then I'll talk about something that as basic as common sense in terms of getting ready, and how some of these lessons learned can be distilled from that part of the adoption journey. And then we'll go into some real lessons from the trenches on how certain things emerge as part of the process. And then we'll cap off with what potentially next stuff that may be coming your way. So let's talk about some human habits. And before I go into the human habits, anybody heard of AJBs, Enterprise Java Beans? Right. So Enterprise Java Beans was kind of a very common type of technology that emerged in the late 90s and early 2000s. One day we get a call from a client, and the client basically is asking us to come and help out with performance issue. And we go into this client, we talk about the architecture, we talk about business requirements, we look at the implementation and all of these things. And we discover that we have about 400 to 450 Java classes dispersed between Enterprise Java Beans and regular Java classes. And when you look at the requirements that says, I need to have the externalization or additional services that can be invoked from the outside, you look at those and you say, okay, the number is minimal. Then when you look at the code that matches those type of requirements, you find that about 20% of the classes were turned to AJBs unnecessarily, right? Everybody was kind of trying to get their hands on an AJBs, and they wanted to experiment with them. AJBs, when you invoke them, there is a container, an AJB container, that's expensive. And also when you invoke them, there is the RMI, which also expensive call compared to a regular Java class that you would invoke from within the JVM. So once you factor these things out, performance goes back to normal, right? I'll use this example, keep it in the back of your head, because there are many things in that example that I will use throughout the discussion when it comes to certain traits that we talk about. So the first thing that we typically see is, this is not new. You go back to the 1800s, psychologists from the 1800s after the French Revolution documented this kind of trend, whether we imitate or we follow the herd type of mentality, whether knowingly or unknowingly, people looked at this pattern, and it has multiple names. You jump on the bandwagon, you look at the follow the crowd, you look at the hive mentality. These are all common names that we continue to exhibit, see, and adopt knowingly and unknowingly because of certain people thought or leaders that this is a good trend, therefore that we have to follow. The second pattern that that somebody mentioned earlier in one previous sessions, the SOS, right? The shiny object syndrome. And if you look up shiny object syndrome, you will find that it's a continual state of kind of looking for something new, just because thinking newer is better, right? That's kind of the definition from psychology perspective. From business development perspective or developer perspective, there is always a better tool. We get bored with what we have, and we hear our colleagues on the other end of the street doing this cool stuff with CI/CD, and it's like, wow, you just push a button, everything is cool. Therefore, we have to go and do it. So how many of you have done this before? Exactly. So this is a very common trend that's also working against you, if you will, as part of the adoption process. And then the third one, this is our affection for the word first, right? We love the word first in class, pioneers, innovators, smart. So we come and start adopting cliches. We are a cloud first company. We are AI ML first company. What does that really mean? Just because Google said that, for a company with the size of Google and maturity of Google and engineering of Google, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to go and take that cliche and say, yeah, we are that. Now, let's assume that you are on par with Google. Most importantly, you have to go and define what that means, right? And you don't just keep it at the C level and say, okay, we are an AI or cloud first company. It has to go and trickle down all the way to the developers, because there has to be some guidelines that says, AI first means this. And when you want to do this, here are the processes and things that you need to be aware of. And here are certain guidelines that you need to do that. If you don't do that, it becomes a cliche, right? So these are three factors that, as we look into the cloud adoption, we'll try to look out for certain things and how these things may be playing against us as part of the process. Now, that aside, let's talk about the first things first when it comes to cloud adoption. Right, the common sense, right? We want to talk about the strategy, the high level, then follow that by a vision. You take the strategy one notch down and you say, okay, strategy, my goal, let's take the cloud as an example. I'm going to be a cloud company. It's in my future to do the cloud. I'm going to define some objectives, and I'm going to define how I'm going to do or implement that cloud at a high level, or what type of divisions are going to be part of that cloud endeavor that I want to embark on. Then you convince your C-suite of this type of statement because of all the benefits that you can master as part of that. And then you go and say, great, show me a vision statement or a document that basically shows how we are going to go and implement that. And that needs to be followed by a business case, right? So it's not enough that you go and look up all of these things and what leaders are doing. You are going to come and say, based on our exact situation, our workloads, our infrastructure, our spend, all of these things combined, our pain points, this is why the cloud is in our future. As common as that may sound, we don't find a lot of companies do that. We find certain bits and pieces of these things, right? We find elements that you ask, where's your cloud strategy? You look at the document, it's 2 years old, right? Where's your vision statement? Where's your business case? Business case in most of the times, extremely lacking, right? So these are things that be on the lookout as you look into these things, and things that you consider as you start looking with other organizations when it comes to, you know, or divisions who come and say, yeah, we want to do this, right? So that's one. The second thing is, and that's one of the key ones, benefits, right? So when you look at the benefits of cloud, the three touted mostly is innovation, agility, and cost reduction. And cost reduction right now is kind of being questioned significantly because now we have a significant baseline that we can look into, right? It's easy back in 2011 to come and say, hey, it's going to save you money for the following reasons, and give you all the logical arguments, because you are going to eliminate your data center, right? And you are going to save all this CapEx stuff, and it's going to turn to OpEx, and this is all wonderful. So these were part of the arguments. At the time, it was much harder to discuss when it comes to security, because privacy and security did not have the maturity that we have today. So it's a balance. Now, the balance is shifting. Security has been kind of a gospel. You go to Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, and you spend a day with them around their security, and you come back convinced, great, this is even better than what I have at my data center, right? So that's part of the message there. Now, cost is a different situation. Cost is basically a very complex scenario, especially with the changes that happened in 2018 when it comes to the accounting versus CapEx and OpEx, and what you can amortize and what additional things that you can do. So it becomes a whole practice in itself when it comes to the cost of the cloud. It's no longer enough to come and say, yeah, these are the workloads, these are the machines. You know, you have to go and look at the lease, you have to look at the payments, you have to look at the interest, what can be amortized, what cannot be amortized. All of these things become extremely complex, and it's beyond the discussion now to talk about it, but it's something to be aware of. And if your organization is not looking into these type of things, that's something that I would bring, because laws have changed and different things are being treated differently. The message that I want to get out of here is, regardless whether it's innovation, cost reduction, or agility, you have to have the right metrics to measure. So when you come a year, 2 years, 5 years from it, and you talk to your C-level, yeah, great, we adopted the cloud. What our benefits are? We managed to reduce cost by 10%. I can show it to you. Or we have better innovation. What does that mean, right? Or agility. You have to define these things up front, because if you don't, it just becomes something you adopted just because you thought it was a good idea and not necessarily the best outcome for your organization. And the disappearing data center is one of the biggest myths that we see out there, right? You know, you can just kill your data center, and all this money that you have as part of the data center cost, you can just ignore it because everything is going to move to the cloud. And it becomes part of the OpEx spend, and if life is going to be good, no one needs to go and maintain $150 million type of data center across different regions, right? That has proven to be completely false statement. What we're seeing right now, we see the data center shrinking. Year over year, data center spend is approaching about $200 billion, right? With about 7% growth year over year. So it's not dying. it's expanding, albeit a little bit slower. And think about all the cloud providers and their investments in data centers. Google spent $30 billion on modernizing their infrastructure with terabits that can transfer the content of Library of Congress in about a second or second and a half based on a pipeline that they're doing as part of their infrastructure. Amazon, Microsoft, they're all doing the same thing. So that spend is not decreasing, it's increasing. It's increasing in different directions and different type of categories. But at the end of the day, yes, we see the data center for clients potentially shrinking, but it's never disappearing. Now, the cost, again, one of the key fundamental issues that we see with clients when we look at their vision statements or business case is the fact that you have these rosy expectations when it comes to the cost. An example, you come and say, okay, I'm going to build a platform in about 3 months, and I'm going to start migrating workloads in about 6 months, right? Reality comes and you are into year 1 and you haven't finalized your platform. Why? Because it's complex. You have regulatory security compliance, you have PII data, you have layers of security that you need to implement, and the question becomes even more complex, right? So what happens with this just particular example? In your business case, you put 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, reality says 1 year, migrate the workloads. If you're doing it yourself, right? Most likely customers have consultants working with them to migrate and build these platforms. That cost just doubled for this fact, right? Just on this particular instance, take this example, multiply it with other things. You discover that, oh, there are anchor workloads that cannot move to the cloud. Oops, your data center has to stay now. So that $100 million that you took out from the business case, it's no longer valid. You have to go back and factor it into the business case. So what happens to your business case? Basically, it doesn't look good, right? So that's why we ask clients, what are the true elements that you want to include here, and start pressure testing that, start throwing rocks at it. If it stands the pressure, great. If it doesn't stand the pressure, you have to be very conservative as part of the estimate. And then cloud security, you know, I talked about 2011, 2012, where we had to struggle to go and convince clients of cloud security at the time. Now it's the other way around, right? Still, there are some organizations in certain industries where they think they can do better than the cloud. All due respect to that, right? But for the majority of the clients, right, you cannot compete with Google, Amazon, and Microsoft when it comes to security. What they spend dwarfs what you spend in 10 years on security. And the fact that they have all of these workloads with, yeah, potentially some incidents not significant, right? That basically tells you there is good enough security for the majority of us to go and do that, right? So you basically go from complete risk aversion to risk tolerance, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The other thing that you need to be aware of when it comes to cloud implementations, you know, especially for the highly regulated industries, it's not enough that Google or Amazon or AWS or Microsoft publish a cloud service that says, I'm going to use Vertex AI or GCP buckets, right? Most of us will take that for granted. Yes, yeah, it's going to be part of my future because it's there. Banks, healthcare, and government will take potentially sometimes 3, 6 months, 9 months to go and review every service and try to whitelist it in terms of what can go wrong, what type of parameters you have there, where can I shoot myself in the foot, right? And what type of remedies that you have to go and put there so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot, right? So when we talk about these things, we talk about OPA policies, right? That's an alert for shiny object. So just be careful. Yes, it's good. So it can help you with this, or drift control. And that's where KCC, another shiny object, right, comes into the picture. But at the end of the day, these are good tools, but you need to rationalize why you would want to use them. What type of impact would that have on your organization? And then is that truly a need for you, or you're just doing it because it looks good on the resume? And lots of us, me included, you know, when we went from C, C++ and all of these things, you always wanted to go, yeah, where is C++? Where is Java? And all of that stuff, because that looks much more impressive on the resume than just C, right? Or AGBs or all of these things. So be careful with these type of things, because they tend to kind of sometimes derail more than expedite. The problem becomes even worse when you have your C-level going to a conference and hearing about the shiny object. That becomes a much bigger problem, right? So just keep in mind, things have to be rationalized as part of the process. And finally, we get to our business case. And the business case, as I mentioned, it's a detailed view of that strategy, vision, getting to the business case. And there are implementation plans as part of that. There is a timeline because everything has to be constrained within a timeline, whether it's year, 2 years, 3 years, 4, 5, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So you have to be truthful to yourself to put these things. And also you have to consider, what does it mean if I don't move to the cloud? Is that a must-have type of situation? And that has to be a question that you answer objectively, because for me, as a consultant coming to your organization, one of the first questions I'm going to ask, why and why not, right? Yeah, we all understand cloud is good, but for your particular case, do you have a nice, sweet gig going on for you, or is it better to move to the cloud? So these are important questions to ask and be truthful about the outcomes with these type of things. One of the key issues that we always see, so I jumped to Google Cloud back in 2017, and it was really a nice ride because, hey, there weren't enough people who knew Google Cloud. So you're always in hot demand. And I was telling a friend, 2017, I think, by 2018, 19, we'll have all the AWS guys. Once they hear about all the cool stuff here, they'll all jump to Google Cloud and probably things will be better. Fast forward 2023, the demand is still very high, extremely high. And I think it's across all the 3 cloud providers, right? And what does that really mean? For a company trying to adopt the cloud, I would say 90% of the time, we go into organizations where they heard about AWS or GCP or Microsoft, and 10% of the IT team toyed with the cloud, right? What does that really mean? That really means you really cannot do it alone. Simple. And you have to have somebody to guide you as part of the process, right? Whether that's cloud, AI, or whatever it is, right? All these new trends, right? They move so fast. The practices, adoption, all of these things, kind of change very quickly. And for example, you get a plumber into your house and they look at things. It's like, okay, $500 in 5 minutes. Well, gee, that's too much. Why? Because, oh, I could have done it in 2 days. Yeah, but you probably have broken another line that would cost you $2,000, right? So there is a case to be made for help needed as part of the process, and make sure that whatever you do, you look at best practices, you look at other companies, what they have done, and what made their journey for adoption easier as part of that. And once you get there, you start getting into all these best practices that we look into. Now, this diagram, I started developing probably 5 years ago, and I augmented almost every little bits and piece depending on what you want to do with it. When I talked about a cloud platform, right, and sometimes you hear it in the name of landing zone or foundation, right? When we talk about cloud platform, it's very well-defined item that we talk to with our clients. It's well architected, opinionated. It's for you, for your particular industry or particular client, right? It has the security, the regular compliance, the scalability, and you can do all the innovation, migration, all of these things as part of it. And if you want to peel the layers down, you look at the bottom, that's where your Google Cloud or Amazon or AWS or Oracle, whatever, they give you these Lego blocks, right? That's what they give you. It's your job to go take these Lego blocks and build something out of them. And every time you build something out of them, they are certified. Let's say HIPAA, right? Or FedRAMP moderate. Anything you build on top of that, you have to go and certify. It's not enough that they are HIPAA certified or FedRAMP certified. If you built an application that you have to be compliant for whatever practices, you have to go to take that application through that certification process, right? So therefore, it's not a trivial task to take these Lego blocks and build the platform. And the platform, you can look at these type of 10 items there, starting with identity and access management all the way down to FinOps, right? Look at your existing platform and how much of that do you have in your existing platform? If the answer is 80, 90%, great, you're doing a great job. If the answer is 20, 30, 40%, then you have a lot of homework to do. right? Because these are all required type of activities as part of the process. When we talk about, secret management, or we talk about vaults, when we talk about identity and access management, the groups, how to make life easier for my developers and adopters of that cloud. If you don't talk about these questions, you are going to run into constant maintenance type of situations because you really didn't ask the question up front. Now you're just maintaining the flight while it's moving, right? So these are the things that you have to be paying attention to as part of the process. And we could spend days actually on this particular slide because we use that actually in a workshop. And we spend probably 3-4 hours on this one particular slide to talk about what do you have, what do you need, and where are you on that maturity scale when it comes to these top 10 areas, right? So that's an important thing to pay attention to. And then you take that platform and you start building things on top of it. These are your value-added services, your COTS applications, or your other additional things that you may want to monetize. And if you run into much more productivity/productization, you can even venture out and put them on a marketplace where other people can use them, all running out of your platform with the right levels of isolation, with the right level of networking and scaling that's needed, right? So that's what this platform looks like. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you, you have to reach that marketplace maturity on day one. No, we can start small, where we look at these type of building blocks and say, what do they mean? And then a roadmap as part of your future will get you to that marketplace stage where you say, yeah, I want to do monetization because I have lots of data sets I can enrich. I have these algorithms that I can expose, or I can go find oil in places where oil people thought it dried out, and I have this cool algorithm that looks at seismic data and gives me that results, and I can monetize that with other oil companies, right? So there are many varieties that you can look into when it comes to this, and that's all enabled by your platform. The second more important factor is, oh, great, I got my platform, took me 6 months, 9 months. Now I need to go and build or take my workloads and go into move them to the cloud. Now, in the traditional sense of things, people looked at the CMDB, and that's the configuration change management database, took a footprint of that and said, great, this is my IT footprint. Input into a tool that gives you some management / cutting and dicing in terms of these workloads, and you start saying, yeah, this is my footprint. One way to look at it. The other way to look at it, you put a crawler and goes and crawls within the organization and discovers all these IPs. Then it's good to match what you discover versus what you have in the CMDB. And sometimes you go and take that view and say, this is my workload. Any thoughts? This is the right answer or wrong answer? Do you think this is enough to go and discover the workloads? Anybody says correct? Okay, nobody's saying correct. And that's the right answer. We don't do that alone. It's a starting point. You're absolutely right. And that's what I have here as the bottoms up, right? I have the arrow coming down as the top down. The top down is more important. I'm not saying one replaces the other, but the top down will give you the pruning, the grouping, all these things that you need to do so that you can go and say, yeah, these are apps. These are components of those apps. There are some interdependencies that you need to discover. Some of these interdependencies are discoverable within a tool. Most of them are not, right? So when you go to your famous 6 Rs, right? Whether you want to rehost it, replatform it, re-architect it, retain it, whatever, right? So you start looking into these things and say, okay, which ones I'm going to rehost? And by the way, there is also reinstall, because sometimes rehost will not cut it for you because you want a golden image and the tool cannot handle a golden image. So it becomes a reinstall type of endeavor. Or sometimes, the rehost people look at it and say, lift and shift, just lift it and shift it and move it to the cloud very quickly, right? In certain instances where you have GCVE, that's the VMware on the cloud, there's an option for Microsoft and Google and others. Yeah, that's an easy part. It requires some network extension at the L2 level, and then you can move them quickly. But these are the minority out there, right? The majority of us will not go and do that. They will go into the traditional route of discovering, analyzing, looking at waves groups, move groups, and then finding the interdependencies, the complexities, and move it. And along the way, you need to stay away from migration greed, where you think you can go and put everything on the truck and just move it to the cloud, right? So these are part of the lessons learned that we do. So the top-down one is one of the key lessons learned that we do. And then most importantly, I was having a side conversation with one of the folks here, and we were talking about some shiny objects, right? POC to the power n. Why is that? Because you're coming to the cloud with some knowledge, right? You want to make decisions. Is AlloyDB in your future, right? You want to do analytics workloads, right? Or you want to do some transactional workloads, or do both? Looks good on the paper. Can it handle your scalability, performance type of requirements? That's where you go and spin up 2 people, 3 people, look at it, document the use case, document the success factors, give them 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, come back and report, right? If it looks good, great. We include in our architecture design and continue. If it doesn't, it stops there, right? In one of the clients that we've done, 30 POCs were going in parallel and multiply by 2, 3. That's one client that we had to deal with, right? Because there are lots of things that needed to be decided, lots of new stuff, lots of use cases. So I would not be shy from doing that, right? So that's an important thing to consider. And then guardrails, right? Every item that you've seen on that platform slide, the 10 items, identity access management, all the way down to FinOps. If you don't provide the guardrails, you will fall, guaranteed, right? Because that AGB company, the one I mentioned earlier, right? If somebody told them, hey, AGBs are only in these type of scenarios, and you put that in the code review process and you go through it, and the moment that pops up, say, you know what, you're violating the principle, doesn't go through, right? So guardrails are extremely important, and guardrails will also protect you from what we call tech debt. I've been in the industry for more than 25 years. I've dealt with tons of clients. I have yet to see one company that does not have tech debt. Anybody doesn't have a tech debt? All right. So tech debt, lots of people think about it and moving to the cloud as a great opportunity to say, I'm going to fix it, right? Whether it's a networking tech debt or security tech debt or DevOps tech debt. Yeah, go ahead.
Cloud is the new tech debt.
Well, right. So tech debt is very dangerous. And how you provide tech debt treatment is going to be very detrimental to how your journey is going to be successful or not successful. Why is that? Because the moment you build the business case and you put these 3 years, 4 years into it, and you don't communicate all the way down to the developers. Developers are shiny object gaga, right? I want to go and eliminate all of that stuff. They don't care about what you put in the business case. They want to go and build all this nice, shiny object stuff, the cool stuff. And yeah, if it takes them 2 years, so be it. It's tech debt. I need to get rid of it. So tech debt is extremely dangerous. And if you don't have the right guidelines, it can kill your project. So you need to provide some guidelines all the way down. It says, yeah, here's what we are going to handle as part of tech debt, prioritize it, and then slowly go and do it. If you have all the money and the timeline, which I don't think lots of people have, right? Go ahead and eliminate it. But that is kind of something we don't see. We see incremental type of things that you go to fixing the tech debt. The other part is the double-edged sword of cloud consumption. Every cloud provider will come to you and say, I'm going to give you $5 million, $10 million to adopt cloud, right? Sometimes $100 million. Depends how big the deal is. In return, you're going to consume this much, right? So you go, everybody is cool because you've done some rosy expectations and all that. It's doable. Yeah, we can do it. First year comes, the target is 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, and your current consumption is 100K. What does that mean? You're not going to get that money that were promised to you. And sometimes there are penalties. So what does that become? Becomes a pressure on your neck to go and say, consume, 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 right? Be aware of these things because reality comes and says, this is reasonable. This is not reasonable. Look at the platform, how long it takes to do the platform. Are you highly regulated type of industry? And if there are any assumptions about your platform, especially if you're starting from scratch, that says 3, 4, 5 months, red flag comes up, right? I haven't seen any regulatory right now, and I've dealt with banks, healthcare, exchanges, government to a certain extent. I haven't seen that done in less than a year. Highly regulated type of platforms, right? for PII, lots of isolations and all of these things. So something to keep in mind as you go into the journey, right? Some people may have different requirements than others. On average, sometimes it takes like small retailers, we've done it for like the environment in 6 weeks. So there is something that can be done. We have accelerators that you can click of a button after a few design sessions and you spin out the whole environment, right? It can be done. You take another 2-3 weeks for every higher level environment, QA, pre-prod, and prod, and then you're good to go. But that's not the case with highly regulated type of industries. And then the concept of hybrid, public, private, right? The pendulum, when it swings violently. In the early days, oh, private cloud, that's it. We're not doing any of this public cloud. So, and then it swung the other way, then everything has to go to the public cloud. And now I think we're tilting towards, a mix between hybrid and public, right? And hybrid is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. There are anchor workloads for lots of reasons that you want to keep in your data center. That's a fact, right? So if anybody comes and tells you everything can go to the cloud, right? Another red flag comes up. And then the other question that always you have to dabble with is, what are my runtimes? So we talk about VMs, we talk about serverless, we talk about containers. And we work with lots of companies who come and say, we are container first. Okay, great. What does that mean? That means we do not support VMs. Okay, wonderful. What else? It's like everything has to be containerized. Everything. Firewalls included, right? So you go to that and you build the design, networking, etc. And you come across certain workloads that you have to have NIC cards for the VMs that container cannot support. So what do you do? Well, okay, let's try to containerize again. Spend 3-4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then you fail. Then you say, okay, I'll go with VM. But the design has progressed and did not account for VMs. So what do? You go and retrofit the design, right? So these are the things, when you hear somebody says this first and these type of generic statements, just be very wary of them because experience says it doesn't, right? Same thing for serverless. Serverless is wonderful. There are use cases where there is a sweet spot where serverless can be fine, but it can be also very expensive, right? So you have to go and do your homework when it comes to say, I'm going to run everything cloud functions, right? Excuse my Google language, right? So that's the only one I know. But at the end of the day, there's a sweet spot. Sometimes VMs can be better for you, right? So every workload will have a different type of consumption requirements, and you're going to go and live that and breathe that as part of your cloud journey. And here's another big alert for shiny object, DevSecOps, right? Everybody wants to shift left. What does that really mean? We want to go and incorporate all of these security things and all of that stuff as if we are a bank, right? Banks, exchanges, healthcare, many of those organizations may have their own reasons to do that, governments. But, for another organization that is still dabbling with, I remember one discussion with a client, I said, how's your DevOps maturity today? He said, we are in diapers, So that's an exact response from a client, right? So telling a client like that you are going to go and do this DevSecOps because we have people to get there and do it for you is not necessarily the right thing. And here is the other one that people look into. It's like, yeah, the cloud is going to solve all my problems. You come and become humbled when it comes to certain workloads that says, you know what, it's staying in the data center. Ultra low latency, microsecond type of performance. Thank you very much. Cloud cannot handle that, right? So you just need to be aware of these type of situations because they can derail your whole journey. And at the end of the day, I didn't touch on SRE and operations and all of these things. So security can be a factor. Operation guys, it's like, okay, what are you talking about the cloud? We have no clue. What are you doing? And we need this much to go and learn. Therefore, the journey is going to expand. In many instances, you factor that we are going to migrate out of cloud X to cloud Y in 3 months, 6 months. You discover that a year into it, you're still running the workloads in the existing cloud. You migrated workloads and you're on-prem, you're still paying for it triple ways, right? So these are things, these are real lessons from the trenches, right? So you just need to be aware of them because that's what we were seeing as part of the process. So the next step, what is it? I mean, that diagram that I showed you earlier is the platform. It's not a trivial endeavor to build. And think about, you know, for companies who have IT departments, 100, 200, 500, 1,000, no big deal. They can do it. They have the money to hire consultants. What about the small mom and pop shops and all of these guys who are basically, it's like, what the heck? You know, everyone's talking about the cloud and I have my data centers in the closet, right? So these are important things, tons of clients in that category. Industry clouds, you know, taking these Lego blocks, level of abstraction, we're good in IT and abstraction, we provide multiple layers of abstraction. Eventually, we take all these capabilities, whether it's healthcare, AI, whatever you name it, and you spin out a very consumable cloud that basically says the low entry barrier is very, very low. And I'm going to onboard people, and here are the capabilities that you need. And you don't need to maintain the cloud. You don't need to do that. The big challenge is, can you find a pricing model where it makes it worthwhile for people to go there? Right now, there are 4 industries where these things do exist: retail, healthcare, banking, and government, right? I'm sure more will be coming into it later as part of the process. Edge computing, we had multiple sessions about edge computing, but it is here to stay. The capabilities for edge computing are expanding beyond what was originally intended. Now we have GPUs at the edge. We have 5G random access networks in the edge. We have distributed kind of mini data centers where if you are thinking about exiting your data center or whatever, that could be a potential option. You know, you talk about the walkout solutions, retail solutions, things you do in gas stations, things you do at the airport. These are all edge locations where cameras, sensors everywhere. They track you from the moment you enter, the moment you get out, knowing exactly what you picked, how much money, update inventory, and all of these things. These are solutions existing today, right? I'm not talking about something in the future. So the edge is here to stay. And then, you know, one thing that I joke about, do we have multi-cloud first? And, you know, thank God we don't, right? We haven't seen a client said that we are multi-cloud first. Very, very few, right? Government potentially is the one that wanted to be there, but the majority of the clients don't go there. It's by association, forced mergers and acquisitions, whatever the reason, you get into that category. And I was trying to avoid this for the past 30 minutes, but I have to say it, right? Gen AI to the cloud, what does that do? You know, I think there are lots of opportunities for Gen AI to the cloud, right? Think about an interface where you go and track packets, network packets, where you have to go and use multiple tools and try to find if there is a threat or analysis of the malware or any of these things. Gen AI has the potential to go and look at all this data. Whenever you have the ability to ingest data, train, these are wonderful use cases for Gen AI. The cloud has tons of use cases where lots of things can go wrong. Your co-pilot on the cloud can be a wonderful tool for you, depending on your area, whether that's DevOps, whether that's coding, whether that's SRE, whether that's security. It's double edge as well. The threats and the threat vector will be much bigger. As you think about how to optimize, the hackers are thinking, can I go and take an open source model and train it on how to infiltrate, right? So it becomes a much bigger problem as part of the process. So these are things that you have to consider. And at the end of the day, it's your journey, right? The cloud, you know, I'm not trying to put any seed of doubt in the cloud, but experience tells us that there are certain realities that we have to be aware of. One of those realities right now is the repatriation back to the data center. Why? Because there are significant workloads, excessive, that you migrated to the cloud and suddenly you look at your cloud bill at the end of the month and anticipation was 10,000, 100,000, suddenly it's 500,000 per month. What do you do, right? And there are at least 2 examples that went public with the repatriation of the cloud. At the end of the day, it's your journey. You look for what's best for you and craft your way because every client is unique. And we haven't talked to a single client where it was identical, right? So you have your own reality, your own requirements. And with that, I'll conclude and open it up for any questions. Thank you. Any questions?
right? So they probably will be coming and gonna walk up. But yeah, for now, questions.
Okay.
All right. Questions?
What is your recommendation for big data workloads, like from moving Hadoop workloads to appropriate?
Yeah. So the question, what's your recommendation for big data workloads? And I'll tell you, my experience is Google Cloud. So I'll answer it from Google Cloud perspective. So in Google Cloud, if you look at Hadoop and big data, if you want to do quick lift and shift, the answer is Dataproc. Would I go and recommend Dataproc? No. Why is that? Because over time, that's going to be very expensive for you, right? So even Google will tell you that. So it's not just me telling you that. What is recommended is to go and look at your existing Hadoop, and a combination of GCS buckets and BigQuery is the right answer for you, right? And if that means I'm going to have to rewrite certain queries to adapt to Google BigQuery, that would be the right answer, right? And before you go and take my answer for it, at least that's the collective experience that we have, feel free to go and do a POC, right? We tell customers to do that. Take the most complex scenario that you have and try to run it. You can try to go and run it on Dataproc. It will run, probably with minor modifications, right? From Spark perspective. And then take your time to go and convert it and see the difference and look at the cost and the future projections of the cost, and you will get to the right answer.
I completely agree with this. Don't use Dataproc. English. Spend some time, you drive your thing and make it in future.
Yeah.
Any of your clients are moving more, I don't want them.
That's the AWS type, right? I don't deal with AWS. Yeah. Yeah, I'm Google Cloud guy. Yeah, sorry.
That's why we need a war. Here, because Google Cloud.
Yeah. Federated cloud? Well, it all depends, right? So what is the outcome, or what are you looking for to do with federated clouds, right? So if you look at scenarios, with healthcare exchanges, right? So there is a case to say, I want to do federate exchanges when it comes to do that, right? Federated cloud in the context of industry clouds, right? If you were to look at that, is there a use case that says, I'm a bank that could benefit from additional services that could be done at other locations? And the answer could be yes, right? Whether we call it federated or whatever name we want to, it doesn't really matter, right? But if there is a use case for it, I think the technology exists today that you can invoke anything anywhere, right? With the right level of security and authorization and authentication. Any other question? Okay, if there are questions, thank you very much.